Hello, all, and welcome to another episode of Crap from the '80s. I mean, this is unprecedented. An actual episode video and not a live show. What's this? Hello, folks. This is I guess this is one of those fun-size, bite-size episodes of Crap from the '80s. It's not going to be super long. It's just going to be a one subject that I want to talk about. And, hopefully you guys know about it. If not, then I urge you to seek it out. Of course, if you're a horror fan, uber horror fan, you grew up as a monster kid and you love all things horror, you're just sort of getting into it now, and you want to go back and see some of the gems and weird obscurities and things of that nature in the genre. And today I want to talk about Fangoria's Weekend of Horrors. Yes. The reason I wanted to talk about this VHS in particular was because it really did start my love affair with Fangoria magazine. This is the very VHS that I rented from Video Connection in the 80s over and over and over again until they ended up giving it to me. Now, I've talked about Video Connection before many, many times, and the place was magical, and they knew me. They really did know. I was always in there, and back in the day you could reserve new releases, and you better believe I was constantly reserving like any of the new weird comedies or the horror stuff, and I was reserving it ASAP. And it started to get to where like I would go in and they'd be like, "Hey Chris, we have these new horror titles come in. Do you want to save them for you when they come in?" I'm like, "Absolutely." And so this was released in 1986, and I can't remember if I saw it like at the tail end of 86 or if I saw it in 87. And at that time I was 10. And I had seen horror movies and already I was a big movie kid, big sci-fi fantasy kid. I've talked about my mom taking me to see Nightmare on Elm Street when I was 7 and things like that. And up until this point, I had sort of skimmed through Fangorias at our newsstands. We had a newsstand right across the street from Video Connection that had like where I would get my comic books that I didn't have a subscription to, because I did have a subscription to Marvel at that time. So Fangoria was there. Fangoria was at Giant, which was our grocery store, local grocery store, and it was also in this place called Newberry's, which also had toys and all sorts of stuff like that. But I would just like look through. I would look through Fangorias. I would look through Starlog, all of that stuff. But I didn't really I certainly didn't buy it for myself or anything like that. But I already was a burgeoning horror fan and whatnot. So I rented this, one, because, it was Fangoria, and two, it had Freddy and Elvira on the cover. So I was like, what, this looks great. And then I see on the back, so I see makeup effects, and I was like, really like, I loved special effects and puppetry and makeup and animatronics and all those types of things, and creating creatures and things like that. So I was gobbling up anything that was remotely like that. And it seemed so Fangoria Weekend of Horror started in 85. So this might have been the second annual Fangoria Weekend of Horrors. It's a convention. And they shot the whole thing. And this is your sort of, a documentary behind the scenes look at a Fangoria Weekend of Horrors. But what makes this a little more special than just your average convention, you know, BTS, is that they talk with a lot of filmmakers and a lot of special effects artists, and they're going behind the scenes of some of the movies that they're talking about as well. So you get to see a lot of like raw footage, and so it's a little, it's almost like they encapsulated what it's like to go to a Fangoria Weekend of Horrors in a video, which is what they're supposed to be doing, of course, but it really is like an amalgamation of everything that they do at the shows. And I started going to Fangoria Weekend of Horrors. That was the first convention I ever went to in 1993. And geez, up until, so from 93 to probably 2001, all I did was Fangoria Weekend of Horror shows. And then like, you know, I started going to Chiller and started going to all these other conventions around the country. But, you know, it was like a goal and a dream of mine to make it to a Fangoria Weekend of Horrors. And then 93, with my girlfriend at the time, we did. We went to, every time we would go to the Fangoria show, it was always in New York City. But they had them in LA and Toronto and all over the place. But anyway, so this became sort of a real boost, not only to want to get to a horror convention, but also to continue to make movies and, you know, look into the creating of the special effects and all that stuff, and getting a chance to see behind the curtain of certain like filmmakers and certain films that I loved and whatnot. And so this became a very important VHS for me. And I mean, it's seen better days. It's you know, definitely wearing itself out because I played it over and over and over again. So before I even owned it, I rented it like all the time. And then when we got 2 VCRs, I duped it for myself and had my own copy. But once again, they, you know, it was like that with a lot of VHS at Video Connection with me. And like a lot of the original VHS that I have is straight from Video Connection after they would just give it to me because I rented it so much. But I think up-and-comers, film fans, horror fans, special effects artists, special effects wannabes, you know, all of that, all of the above should give Fangoria Weekend of Horrors a shot. It's really fun. It's very nostalgic for me, but I think, you know, those of us that, you know, love 80s horror, grew up in the 80s, this is like a beautiful, magical, mystical, spooky time capsule of that time. You know, those filmmakers were rock stars. Those special effects artists were rock stars. Like, and this really shows that, you know. And there's some stuff that came later, documentary wise, that would focus on this type of stuff. There's also the Gorgon videos, which were really fun and awesome, and the Gorgon video magazines, which were fantastic as well. But, you know, and because the spooky season is happening, because Halloween is upon us, and, you know, we are in the months of Samhain and the witching hour, this is a perfect little nugget of nostalgia, horror nostalgia, to watch during your marathons or whatever you do every year. You know, one, if you have seen it and own it, haven't watched it in a while, pop it in. It's going to give you those warm, fuzzy feelings like it does me. And then folks who want to add some new stuff to their rotation, give Fangoria's Weekend of Horrors a try. It's really fun. And it makes you, I don't know, for me, it always puts me in a great mood, and it really like gets my filmmaker, horror genre, movie juices flowing. I think it's just wonderful. I believe you can probably find the whole thing on YouTube. And if not, if you want to actually spend the money, I think it's probably like $40 on eBay. I'm sure there's DVD bootlegs out there as well of this. Yeah, I just pop it in the old VCR up in the 80s room and I'll give it a whirl again. It's so good and I recommend it. And again, it set me on a path of wanting to do Fangoria's Weekend of Horrors, wanting to commit to buying Fangoria. And it took a couple years before I actually did it myself. And so my first issue was in 1989 that I bought for myself. But I was still going and reading them in the stores and really like, it could have been my family at the time being like, what? You're 10 years old, you're not going to have this stuff on your walls or you're not going to read that stuff. But I mean, I did it. I mean, I was going to these movies and, the family was taking me to a lot of this stuff. I mean, I can't tell you how many things I've seen. But, family's weird. But anyway, Fangoria's Weekend of Horrors, Creation Entertainment. I did a lot of these Fangoria shows, even as not just a fan, but also a seller. Started selling my movies in 1996 at Fango shows. And I think the last Fangoria show that we did as both seller and fan was probably mid 2000s, maybe 2002, 2003, maybe 2004. I don't know. But we were doing all these other shows. But it was a bummer when it left. And I hope that, Creation sort of, Fangoria and Creation sort of split doing the shows. And then Fangoria went off on their own to do them. And I don't think it was as successful. But it would be great with Fangoria still going now. It'd be great to see a new Fangoria Weekend of Horrors. I would definitely go. I think it would be, a real nostalgic trip. And guys, I recommend it. And Fangoria magazine, of course. Look for the back issues. It is still running. It's about $20 now. It's a very thick. It's like reading a paperback book, basically. They're thick and they're packing a lot in there, and it's full color, and they're putting a lot of effort into it. But it is $20. But Fangoria is still alive and kicking, and I love it. I love that it is, and it's such a part of my youth and me, who I am as a person, as a genre fan, as a filmmaker, as a movie fan, and all that stuff. So Fangoria's Weekend of Horrors. Give it a shot. There's some great stuff in here. Really great stuff, including a Robert Englund just coming off of Freddy's Revenge and talking about what it's like to sign autographs for that and V and all this stuff, and how the Freddy phenomenon was growing and whatnot. And it's got some great stuff with Tobe Hooper. Like I said, it's got some great special effects behind the scenes. It's just awesome. So there you go, guys. That's my little fun-sized nugget of horrific nostalgia for you 70s babies and 80s kids, like myself. And then just horror fans in general. I'm blabbering now, but I'm gonna go, and I'm going to do something creepy and horrific, maybe to my own genitalia. Who knows? Only me.